Robots have influenced Henry's life greatly. They gave him a reason to live. Stretch is the closest to improving Henry's life and therefore mine. I see Stretch doing several things around the house to help Henry and me, and they have contributed to the advancement and the development of this robot. This is one I want to share because it also is interesting to see the care recipient's perception and the care partner's perception. So Henry, the foam card holder was quite ingenious and allows me to play my own hand, which is great. Using Stretch was surprisingly easy, showing how adaptable Stretch is. However, when able-bodied people are playing with you, it is much faster and easier for them to help and not inconvenient for them. So that's his perspective. Jane's perspective. We have to ask ourselves over and over, why robots when a caregiver can do it 10 times faster? I see what it does to my husband mentally when he can do things by himself and not depend on anyone. This is huge because it translates to one's mental state. Attitude is the key to improving and moving forward. So even if it takes a little bit longer for Henry to do it with the robot, he's having more fun. He's having the autonomy. It's improving his quality of life. So some of the next steps for collaboration, one of the things that's exciting is that there are these robots all over the world. Now I know $18,000 to $20,000 is still a lot of money, but when you think about the potential, it's relatively inexpensive. And so various universities have purchased the robots, companies are working with the robot, and so there's an entire community working with these robots, and everything is in open source. So if we design something here at Illinois, we program it, it's shared with everybody at all of the other sites. It's really going to advance robotics in this space. I mentioned we have funding from the National Institutes of Health, and here we're supporting specifically on older adults with mobility limitations. We're also hosting a pitch competition this year, and the winner will get time in the Life Home using the Stretch robot to explore their ideas for using Stretch to support people aging with long-term disabilities. And then I'm teaching a new course this year, which has been a lot of fun, focused on human-robot interaction in the context of community health. So I just want to briefly share a couple of other robot studies that we're doing in the Life Home, just to show you the scope of what we're interested in. One example is a project with my colleague Girish Krishnan in the Granger College of Engineering at Illinois, and Ryan Reish, who's at OSF Healthcare. And we're exploring what they call soft and dexterous service robots to support healthcare at home. And the idea is you might have a rigid robot arm with a soft extension coming out of it so that you can reach up onto a shelf and not knock everything down. You can hand something to a person, less likelihood of injury. And so this is funded by a pilot grant project. So we're just getting started, but what we're looking at is healthcare providers' ideas for using this kind of robot for telehealth. What do they think it could do for them? And then what are the technical requirements? We're also exploring older adults' attitudes about having something like this in their home. So what we're exploring right now, so here's an example of, you can be looking at a wound on a participant's leg. You can reach around a chair with the soft arm and look at something that's difficult to see on the back of his leg. You can look at medication bottles, and there's a camera on the tip of the robot where you can see close up what you're looking at. Healthcare providers have a lot of ideas of how this might be useful. We're exploring the idea of a mobile platform where if you've had surgery and you need rehab or you need follow-ups for the first couple of weeks, we deliver the robot to your home. And then especially for rural elders here in Illinois, it's difficult to send somebody to the home every day for a 10-minute wound check. This would be something that would be easy to do with this type of robot in the home. So we're exploring, it's an exploration of the potential of this kind of a robot from two sides, two stakeholder groups, the healthcare providers and the older adults. Another project we're working on is thinking about how to use a robot to provide wayfinding assistance for people who have visual impairments. And this is with my colleague Katie Driggs Campbell, who's also in engineering here at Illinois, funded by the Illinois Campus Research Board. And so thinking about how can we support individuals who have visual impairments when they're navigating unfamiliar and unstructured indoor spaces. If they're in a familiar space, most people with a visual impairment have figured out an easy way to move about their own apartment or dorm room or a classroom even once it becomes familiar. But what about when it's unfamiliar and unstructured? And so right now, we're doing a needs assessment with blind individuals over the age of 18, so younger adults and older adults. What are their preferences for wayfinding assistance? And then we're exploring autonomous navigation and object avoidance. We might end up using the stretch robot as the basic platform for this study. One big challenge here, though, is the communication. How should the robot communicate to the person about what direction to go, or if there's an obstacle in front of them? And so we're exploring different ways of communication. Should it be through sound? Should it be through haptics? Should it be through voice? So this, again, is an exploration study with a lot of potential, I think, to support people of all ages with visual challenges. Third, we're very interested in the role of socialness of a robot. So for all of these robots I've been describing, I haven't really talked about what they look like or their personality or how social they are. And so that's another project that I'm exploring with Travis Cadillac and Megan Bales in my lab. And this is one survey that we did where we showed people different videos of robots that varied in how social they were. And one thing that I think is very interesting, I'll just share one piece of data with you, is that the user perceived sociability, shown here on the x-axis, as their perception of sociability increases, the trust, which is shown on the y-axis, also increases. And so if you're thinking about robots that are going to provide assistance to people, trust is critical. And what these data illustrate is that trust is directly related to how social they perceive the robot to be. So this is something we'll be exploring further. So in sum, when we think about robot design for health and wellness, we absolutely need to take a systems approach. We need to be thinking about the human, the robot, the task, the context, all of those things. It's a complex space that we need to embrace when we're doing this kind of design. We also need to think about all of the stakeholders. So this is showing Henry and Jane, the occupational therapist on the team, thinking about the human, the robot, the task, the context, all of those things. It's a complex space that we need to embrace when we're doing this kind of design. We also need to think about all of the stakeholders. So this is showing Henry and Jane, the occupational therapist on briefly introduce 3 centers that my lab is affiliated with. We're always open to collaboration. So Jeff mentioned a book that we wrote. This was an output of the CREATE Center. We've been funded since 1999 by the National Institute on Aging. The focus of CREATE is on aging and technology very generally. What are some technologies that could help all of us as we grow older? A more recently founded center is called TechSage, that was funded in 2013 by the National Institute on Disability, Independent Living, and Rehabilitation Research. And here the focus is on technology to support aging in place for people with long-term disabilities. And in our center, we're primarily focused on people with vision, hearing, and mobility disabilities. And the third center is called Enhance, also funded by NIDLR. And this is focused on enhancing neurocognitive health abilities, networks, and community engagement. And the Enhance Center is focused on people who are aging with a cognitive impairment. So it might be mild cognitive impairment. They could be on the path to Alzheimer's or other dementia, or individuals who've had a stroke or traumatic brain injury and have some cognitive impairment as a result. So all of these centers are active, and we're very interested in collaborations. The last thing I want to mention, I didn't have a chance to talk too much about it, but I want to mention it to everybody. We started a new master's program last year that is a Master of Science in Health Technology, and it's a 1-year intensive professional degree. So people come in for 12 months, classes in the fall, classes in the spring, and then a capstone experience in the summer that is sponsored by an industry partner, a clinical partner, or a research faculty. And so I encourage you to, I know you might not have time to write down this website, but just email me if you have any questions or you have any students that you think might be interested in this program. It's a one-of-a-kind focused on human factors and health, that intersection of the two. So with that, I introduce you to my lab. We had the opportunity to go to the Life Home this week. We're still wearing masks, so we all took our masks off for just 5 seconds so we could take a picture together. But this is the Human Factors and Aging Laboratory team, without whom I couldn't do this work. My email address, wendyr@illinois.edu, and our lab site is hfaging.org. So please visit and send questions. And I think I have the opportunity to maybe answer questions here. Is that right? I tried to save some time so we could have some discussion.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. We do have 15 minutes for Q&A. I'll keep my eye on the Q&A and chat.
And by the way, that's Paro, a robot behind me. That is a social robot. He's hanging out with me today.
Sounds good. So, Dean, if you don't mind keeping your eye on the hand raising, and I'll keep my eye out on the chat and Q&A. If anyone has questions, you can type them out or raise your hand and you'll be invited up to the stage to ask your question.
So I do see a question about the eye gaze for control and eye contact with the robot. Where do people look when interacting with the robot versus trying to control the robot? It's a great question. So they're looking at the screen where the interface is, and they have to hold their gaze at a particular location when they want to move the robot in a particular direction. But one of the things you might have seen in the video with Henry was he was having to go back and forth. I'm looking at where the robot is, I'm looking at the screen, I'm looking at where the robot is, I'm looking at the screen. That's one of the complexities. Henry does have limited movement of one thumb, and he's able to use a joystick. And so we were exploring if we can make the interface easier for him to control. You would be able to just be watching the robot while you were controlling the joystick. The other avenue of exploration is to save certain activities. So I might say, I want the robot to move closer to the bed. I don't have to guide it. It can remember that path, and I could just rest my gaze on come to the bed, and that would be remembered, and it would happen without me having to control it so carefully. Great question. Thank you. How soon do you think it will be before these devices are commercialized? You know, you can buy a stretch robot right now, so it is commercially available, but it's really still, I mean, it's available for anybody to buy, but it's still a research robot. So as I mentioned, there's still a lot to be learned as we're moving forward. But I envision within the next few years, having these robots in the home. I mean, Henry has one in his home and is using it. So it's very close, I think, for certain kinds of activities and certain kinds of users. When they'll be available for everybody broadly, I don't know. But I also think In places where multiple people live, so in assisted living communities, for example, they're likely to adopt robots more quickly because it's more cost effective. You could have one robot helping multiple people. It's really on the horizon. I don't want to make a prediction, but it's coming more quickly than we might think. Ooh, now they're coming fast and furious. Okay. How did you decide how the robot would look? That's a good question. I was not engaged in that decision, but it's meant to look very slim and not too imposing and functional. So it doesn't have a face. It doesn't have a personality. That's one of the things we're exploring, is maybe it should, right? But it doesn't right now. And I think the role of appearance is really important. We found in some of our other studies that what people want the robot to look like depends on what the robot does for them. And so robots like Stretch that are very functional and doing tasks, they wanted it to look more machine-like. But if it were a robot that were meant to be more social, I want it to be cute, like the Paro behind me, or to have more of a personality or a human look. That's a very wide open area of research, is the appearance of the robot that's going to be most acceptable to individuals for different activities. The size of the robot is a big issue. So that was one of the big challenges for the PR2, was it was so big. It was designed to fit everywhere that a wheelchair could fit, so it could go through doorways and everything, but it was big. And that was another consideration for the Stretch robot. It's relatively small. You can think about it like the size of a vacuum cleaner. It's in a closet. We keep it in a closet at the Life Home. We take, it comes out when it's needed. So it's a lot smaller and less likely to get in the way. But that is also something that we need to think about. Depth sensors to record and measure the movement and behaviors of the end users. I confess I am not the engineer on the team. I don't know what kinds of sensors are being used, but I encourage you to go to the Hello Robot website because I think they provide more detail about how it works. The idea of using voice command, such as the Amazon Echo, is definitely something we're going to be exploring. A lot of older adults and users in general think it's a lot easier to just tell the robot what I want it to do. But sometimes it takes a lot of precision. So I'm in a very busy office right now with all kinds of stuff, and I want that one thing over there. I'd have to describe it in great detail. My colleague Charlie Kemp has shown that if I could just use a pointer and point at what I wanted, that's actually much faster. So we're looking at different ways of communicating. People think voice because that's what they're familiar with, and the Echo products are a great avenue to explore, but we shouldn't be limited by that. In the Enhance Center, could you talk more about what is being done to work with people with cognitive disabilities? Yes, so we have the way these NIDLR centers are set up, it's a rehab engineering research center. You have to have research projects and development projects. So we have a needs assessment project that I'm lead on. We have another research project that Sarah Saja is lead on that is designing a technology tool to support activities in the home environment. A third project is a development project looking at enabling people with cognitive impairments to use transportation software. So like Google Maps. Google Maps could be so helpful if somebody is having difficulty with navigation and wayfinding and cognitive issues, but they're difficult to use. So developing instructional support and training for wayfinding apps. And then the fourth project is looking at support for prospective memory in the home environment. So Jeff, I encourage you to go to the Enhance website, and there's a little bit more description about the different projects, but there's quite a range of things we're focused on. Let's see, were there any technical issues that could cause frustrations when using the robot? That's a great question. Yes, and I think that's why you engage someone like Henry and Jane. They understand how robots work. They would, we had some technology failures and things that we had to adjust. Rather than get frustrated, they were helping us to try to figure out how to use it. But if you're trying to move towards commercialization and putting it in people's homes, you absolutely need to minimize those types of frustrations. Those are the kinds of things we're trying to solve in the life home before we put it out into people's homes. Excellent point. Let's see, there were a couple about the voice commands. I think I got at that. What do I think needs to be done to get the price down? One of the things we've been trying to think about is, instead of having a robot, one robot that does everything, to have specialty robots. So the analogy is, in your home, you have an appliance that washes your clothes, and a different one that washes your dishes, and a different one for the vacuum. That reduces their cost. You're not trying to have one device that does everything. Same thing with the robots. And so by thinking about what in business I've learned they call the minimum viable product, what does it need to be able to do at the bare minimum to be useful, that helps bring the cost down. And I think those are some of the things that we're focusing on. Did we use any specific methods to investigate satisfaction? Yes, absolutely. So we use standard technology acceptance model components from Davis's work in the late 80s. So perceived ease of use, perceived usefulness, perceived enjoyment. We've also, in some studies, used the NASA TLX, which is a subjective workload, which gets at frustration, which was one of the previous questions. How difficult is it? Is it frustrating? How much cognitive effort is required, physical effort, and so on. So we try to use tools that are off the shelf, so to speak, that have been used for a long time in the field of human factors and in technology development. We add our own as well. We've developed a few measures. I have a technical report that describes them all. We have a robot opinions questionnaire, robot preference questionnaire, and a robot experience questionnaire that we've developed ourselves. Trust with the robot, great question. Again, same thing. There are some standardized trust measures that are used, but one of the things we did in one of my students' master's theses, we did a qualitative evaluation about the PR2 and the what led to people to trust in a robot. And it was very interesting because it was an in-depth qualitative evaluation of what kind of characteristics do they want their robot to have if it's providing them with care. And they want it to look a certain way. They want it to feel a certain way. They don't want it to be hard or difficult if it's interacting with them. They have very clear opinions about what it would take to trust them. So you can use a trust questionnaire, but I also found the qualitative interview questions to probe a little bit more about the trust opinions to be very, very informative. And again, happy to share any of these things that we're talking about with people. Let's see, frustrations, satisfaction. Okay, there are a lot of groups and organizations working on this. Do these moguls support your work? Facebook, Tesla, etc. Not yet. Most of our research is funded by federal agencies, so U.S. federal agencies. We would love to partner. It's difficult to partner with the large companies because, rightly so, they want to own what they're developing. And the way that a lot of the robotics community is set up, everything is open source. So it's a very different model. So it's a little more difficult to partner with the larger companies. We look for opportunities where we can, but we're not really actively doing that just yet. Okay, 3 minutes left. I think we got most of them. Feel free to email me. Again, it's wendyr@illinois.edu. Thank you so much for your engagement and wonderful questions. I really enjoyed this opportunity to meet everybody virtually. Have you worked with diverse backgrounds to help design friendly robots, such as animators, theater folks, and character designers? That's a great question because that's their expertise. Exactly. We do have somebody on our team who's an industrial designer, and we just had a faculty member move from Disney to the University of Illinois, and that's what he was working on, was animatronics. And there's another company that's designing another pet, like the Paro is a baby seal. He's designing a dog, a robot dog, and he's working with the designers that developed the Muppets. So I mean, I think that is the way we need to go, and it's a great example of broadening our thinking about interdisciplinary activities and including designers in they'll have ideas about the development and options that I can't even imagine. Good question. Thank you. Thank you, Dean, for putting my email in the chat. I started to do that, but I can't dual task. So there it is, wendyr@illinois.edu. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
And I hope people will reach out to you. Your talk was absolutely spectacular. And again, thank you so much for your time. I hope you'll stick around for the break and some of our other activities over the next 2 days. We are going to jump into our research colloquium. So Barry, if you don't mind popping up on stage. We are ready for our research panel.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Innovative Solutions for Healthy Aging. I'm really pleased to be here. Absolutely appreciated the presentation that we just had from Wendy. It's fantastic work, and as an industrial designer, I'm quite keen on seeing some of the characterizations that Gina asked about. This morning we have our research colloquium, and just double checking the definition of colloquium. It's interesting because it does pertain to an academic conference or symposium, but it's also about an important and high-level discussion. And so this morning we are joined by two up-and-coming researchers that definitely hit that bar of being able to hit the important high-level aspects on research to support innovative solutions for healthy aging. So please join me in welcoming Justin Bears. Did I pronounce that right, Justin?